Inmates don't have Fourth Amendment expectation of privacy in prison, so that argument is weak. Guards can search his cell without probable cause.
Federal agents walked out of Diddy's cell with 19 pages of his handwritten notes. These weren't just scribbles or idle musings, according to his lawyers. These were sensitive documents tied directly to his defense's strategy. The prosecutors, of course, had their own story. They argued that the materials they seized were mostly mundane, things like personal reminders, notes about birthdays, and motivational quotes. Nothing game-changing, they said. But Diddy's legal team wasn't buying it. They came out swinging, claiming that these notes were protected by attorney-client privilege, one of the most sacred rights in any legal defense. They accused the prosecution of crossing a serious line, calling the raid an outrageous violation of due process.
Won't be disqualified from the case. It goes on to say as well, the prosecutors have reason to believe Diddy is obstructing justice from the prison.
Diddy's lead attorney, Mark Agnifilo, didn't hold back in court. He argued that these notes weren't just casual lists or unrelated scribbles. They were a roadmap for how his team planned to handle the trial. Every detail, from questioning witnesses to strategies for undermining the prosecution's case, was apparently laid out in those pages. "When we meet with Diddy, we work through everything," Agnifilo told the judge. "Those notes are an extension of our conversations." His point? Those documents were not just random, they were crucial to ensuring a fair trial. The drama didn't end there. Agnifilo's argument hit at a larger issue. If privileged materials were swept up and handed to the prosecution, even temporarily, how could anyone be sure that they weren't used to gain an unfair advantage? The defense insisted that the entire sweep was not only unnecessary, but also a direct attack on Diddy's right to mount a proper defense. The court wasn't about to let this slide without action. Judge Arun Subramanian ordered the prosecution to destroy its copies of the notes and promised to personally review the documents in his chambers to determine whether they were, in fact, privileged. For Diddy, this ruling felt like a win, at least for the moment. It ensured that those notes wouldn't be used against him until the judge made a final call. But let's be real, this isn't just about a handful of papers. This raid and the fight over what those notes contained has become a symbol of how high the stakes are in this case. For the defense, it's a chance to call out what they see as government overreach. For the prosecution, it's a battle to maintain control over evidence they believe might be critical to their case. The courtroom was buzzing when Judge Arun Subramanian handed down his rulings. And while Diddy's defense team might be celebrating, it's worth asking, how long can this victory last?
Exemption to attorney-client privilege. All right, let's bring into the conversation right now Nima Rahmani, former federal prosecutor. Nima, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox to discuss a lot of these takeaways.
First, the headline ruling. The judge ordered the prosecution to destroy their copies of those 19 pages of notes seized from Diddy's jail cell. That's right. Whatever those notes contained, the prosecution can't use them until the judge takes a closer look. And when I say closer look, I mean literally. Judge Subramanian is reviewing those documents privately, a process known as an in-camera review, to decide if they're protected by attorney-client privilege. If they are, the prosecution won't ever get to use them. But here's the kicker. If the judge decides they aren't privileged, or worse, if they hint at something that could damage Diddy's case, they'll be back in the mix in no time. It's all hanging by a thread. Now, here's where things took a turn that had everyone in the courtroom doing a double take. The judge ruled that Diddy doesn't have to appear in shackles for future court appearances. Think about it. No more metal cuffs clanking as he walks into the room. For a high-profile figure like Diddy, that's a huge deal. His team argued that being shackled in front of the press and potential jurors creates an unfair image, one that screams guilty before the trial even begins. The judge agreed, giving Diddy a small but meaningful victory in terms of optics. It's one thing to fight a legal battle, but fighting public perception? That's a whole different beast.
hearing on this. Who's the presiding judge in the case? Whether the government did anything wrong. And of course, prosecutors, on the other hand, are going to go on the offensive themselves. And they're saying that Diddy...
But before anyone pops the champagne, let's look at the legal implications. Sure, this ruling buys Diddy's defense some time, but it's not exactly a game changer. If those notes don't turn out to be protected by privilege, they could end up back in the prosecution's hands. And even if they don't, the government isn't short on evidence. Prosecutors are already building a case that points to alleged misconduct, claiming Diddy used jailhouse calls and other methods to influence witnesses. They're playing the long game, and this ruling, while inconvenient, doesn't derail their strategy. For Diddy, though, this momentary win has its perks. It gives his team a chance to regroup and push back against what they're calling overreach by the government. It also sends a message. The defense isn't backing down, and they're watching every move the prosecution makes. Diddy's courtroom victory made headlines. But let's not get carried away. The truth is, this win could be nothing more than a temporary reprieve in what's shaping up to be an uphill battle. The prosecution isn't sitting back and licking its wounds. Instead, they're coming out swinging with allegations that could spell serious trouble for Diddy's case. Here's the crux of it. The prosecution claims that Diddy has been using his time in jail to bend the rules in his favor. Allegedly, he's made calls to witnesses using three-way calling methods and even borrowed other inmates' phone numbers to get around restrictions. These are not small accusations. If proven, they paint a picture of potential witness tampering, a legal minefield. The prosecutors argue that Diddy's actions go beyond trying to defend himself. They suggest he's been actively interfering with the case. This raises the stakes significantly because tampering with witnesses is a big deal, and it could lead to additional charges for obstruction of justice. Let's just say, if this sticks, Diddy's legal problems could get a whole lot worse.
Obstruct justice, tamper with witnesses, trying to dissuade them either by blackmailing or threatening them or even outright bribing them to change their testimony. This is a case that's going to come down entirely to the testimony of those witnesses and victims. So to the extent that they go sideways or do...
Wow, right? The allegations of witness tampering are just wild. If you were in Diddy's shoes, how would you handle this level of scrutiny? Let me know your take down in the comments. And while you're at it, give this video a thumbs up if you're finding the breakdown as insane as we are. Then there's the matter of those infamous notes taken during the jail cell raid. Right now, they're under review by Judge Arun Subramanian, who's tasked with deciding whether they're protected by attorney-client privilege or not. This is a critical moment. If the judge rules that the documents are privileged, they'll be shielded from the prosecution and won't come into play during the trial. But if he decides otherwise, and especially if those notes contain anything that hints at tampering, things could get messy fast. Imagine the impact if the prosecution is allowed to introduce them as evidence. Not only would this support their allegations of misconduct, but it would also undermine Diddy's defense team's claims of unfair treatment. This back and forth over privilege might sound like legal nitpicking, but it's much more than that. It could define the trajectory of the entire trial. And let's be honest, in cases like this, even small details can have massive consequences.
Your Fourth Amendment privilege goes out the window. Those rights, those constitutional rights to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, it requires an expectation of privacy. You just don't have that in prison. So the clearest example I like to give is if you're in custody, your phone calls...
The drama doesn't end there. Coming up is Diddy's third attempt at securing bail, scheduled for November 22nd. If you're keeping count, this will be his third try after being denied twice already. The stakes for this hearing couldn't be higher. On one hand, his legal team is arguing that he deserves a chance to defend himself outside of a jail cell. On the other hand, the prosecution is doubling down, pointing to their allegations of misconduct as reasons why Diddy should remain behind bars. They're likely to bring up everything from the alleged phone calls to his supposed attempts at influencing witnesses. For Diddy's team, this bail hearing is a make-or-break moment. If he's granted bail, it gives him some breathing room to prepare for trial in a much more comfortable environment. If not, it's back to the detention center where every phone call and move he makes will continue to be scrutinized. And let's face it, preparing a defense while under constant surveillance is no easy task. But beyond the legal challenges, there's another battle Diddy is fighting: the court of public opinion. This case has been splashed across headlines, and everyone seems to have an opinion about what's going on. Some are rallying behind him, arguing that the system is stacked against high-profile figures. Others are watching with a critical eye, questioning his actions and motives. Every new development, whether it's a legal ruling, an accusation, or even the fact that he no longer has to wear shackles in court, is adding fuel to the fire.
Rights that prevent that from happening. You need a warrant, you need a wiretap for something like that. You don't need that when you're in prison. Same thing with your jail cell. I mean, you can't demand that law enforcement doesn't come in or prison guards don't come in. You can't expect a warrant like you would.
What makes this even more significant is the broader context. Celebrity legal cases like this one tend to become cultural flashpoints. They shine a light on issues like fairness in the justice system, the treatment of high-profile defendants, and the fine line between public scrutiny and trial by media. Diddy's case is no exception. Every twist and turn is being dissected not just in legal circles, but across social media where opinions are formed in real time. For better or worse, this trial isn't just about what happens in the courtroom, it's about the narrative being shaped outside of it. So where does this leave us? For now, Diddy has managed to score a small victory, but the road ahead is anything but smooth. The allegations of misconduct are hanging over his head, the judge's review of the notes could go either way, and the upcoming bail hearing is a pivotal moment. Every piece of this case feels like a high-stakes chess match, with both sides trying to outmaneuver each other at every turn. And there you have it. Another intense chapter in this ongoing saga. But the big question is, do you think Diddy's win in court is just temporary? Or could this turn the tide in his favor? Let's hear your predictions in the comments. Make sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications, because trust me, you don't want to miss the next update in this case.